Good afternoon, everybody, or good evening, not really sure which one it is. Welcome to this special Members Forum of the ADA. My name is Juanita Phillips. I'm very happy to be here with you this evening. You're going to have the opportunity to ask your good colleagues up here on the stage questions about a range of issues affecting dentistry, including the big one, a review of governance. Fun fact, this is, we believe, the first time ever that nearly all of the presidents are gathered in one place. We are missing Queensland tonight, but everyone's here gathered for this type of forum for the very first time, probably in the 100 plus year history of the ADA. So it's very historic. If you like a Star Wars reference, it's like the Jedi High Council having a meeting. Before I ask the panellists to introduce themselves, I quickly want to run through the protocol for the Q&A just to keep us on time. There'll be two roving mics in the audience. Ethna and Ariel will keep an eye out for anyone who has a question to ask. So I'd suggest put your hand up. When you have the mic, I will call on you at an appropriate time. Please identify yourself. Keep your question brief, please, and direct it, if you can, to the person up here who you think is best suited to answer it. Some members have already submitted questions online. Thank you. If we don't get to them today, I've been told to let you know that they will be answered online. So to get us started, I'm going to ask the presidents to introduce themselves now, starting with Rowan.
I'm Rowan Crusonen. I'm the president of the Australian Dental Association New South Wales.
I'm Jonathan Teo. I'm the president of the ADA VB.
I'm Amit Gurbaksani. I'm the president of ADA Western Australia.
I'm Ajin Chia. I'm the president of ADA Northern Territory Branch.
Stephen Liu, Federal President of the Australian Dental Association.
I'm Fiona Tan, and I'm the president of the ADA Tas Branch.
I'm Vaibhav Garg, ADA SA president.
Thank you all very much for being here. As you can tell, it's party time down the front of the hall. Some of the members have brought their bubbles with them, so let's hope they don't get too rowdy.
That's why they were given the VIP seats.
That's right. Okay, let's get straight to the big question, which is the governance review. And I'm going to ask Steve just to give us a very brief general introduction. What is the current model? What are the changes?
Well, the interesting thing, we went through a strategic planning exercise about 2 years ago and asked all of these lovely people and their constituents what they thought we should be doing strategically. And one of our strongest states, funnily enough, was Queensland, that told us governance is the thing you guys need to fix. We were told that from all angles, and based on that, we knew, not being governance experts, we need to commission someone who knew how to run a process. So as well as our strategy, we got a governance expert team of lawyers in to work out what would be the best model. And here we are today. And I really wanted to thank our presidents because they've been integral in helping members understand what we're trying to achieve and how it pays off for everyone in the audience.
So in very general terms, it's going to be shrinking. The size of the board really is going to be shrinking. And one of the major concerns raised is that a smaller board means less representation from the states and territories. So I'd like to open up the discussion on that topic. Kajin, would you like to start us off with that?
Yeah, sure. So I think, one of the main member concerns around downsizing a board from our current size to, I guess, a board of 7, including obviously an independent, independent federal councillor as well, is obviously the concern about representation. But it's really important to understand that the function of the federal councillors on the board of ADA are there to really run the governance in the sense of the business of ADA. So what we mean by that is things like the marketing strategy and the budget and how things are carried out in terms of the staffing of ADA Federal. From a representation point of view, where that actually becomes important is what we call the National Advisory Council. And so the National Advisory Council is really where all states and territories, including Northern Territory, gets a voice at that National Advisory Council, or NAC as we call it. And that is the panel where we then inform on behalf of our dentists the policy changes that are going to move the needle forward for our profession. And so really the way I see it is that we allow ourselves now through this National Advisory Council to be more representative and to inform better change.
Vibe, I'd like to bring you in now. Do you think it's a good thing that the numbers will be reduced?
Yeah, I think so, because the whole process is moving towards what is gold standard in this space. We need to make this change, because otherwise we're just not going to be prepared for challenges that are emerging outside of the ADA. You know, the business function is really critical, but you know, all of you should be looking at your own branches, your state branches. Where is the work done? The work is done at the committees. It's your dedicated members that are showing up. They're showing up to events. They're taking part. They're participating in the committees, and that is the process. That's the grassroots process that we're trying to emulate for federal as well. And we do see that. You know, having a really top-heavy federal council doesn't really lend itself to that. But having something that's, you know, smaller and then it's informed by a variety of voices is going to be much better.
What do you think, Rowan?
Look, I think in terms of modern governance and contemporary governance standards, having a board that considers the balance of constructs that make up decision making is really important. And having an effective board means that you need a skills-based board that's able to eliminate the blind spots that exist within the governance framework of how an organisation is run. So adding to what the others have said so far, I think ADA moving towards a model where we consider a skills-based board rather than a representative board is going to be paramount in terms of affecting not only good board effectiveness, but better organisational outcomes. And that's what ultimately we all want.
So how do you address the concerns that members have about these changes?
I think a lot of it comes down to having forums like this and actually having that conversation around what it is that contemporary governance does for organisations and what that means for them as a member. And from my perspective as President of ADA New South Wales, the ability for an organisation like ADA to actually move the dial forward and be a pioneer in this space across oral health is going to be really important for how we affect greater organisational outcomes, not only for ADA Inc., but also for the profession moving forward. And considering all of the different elements that make up corporate governance within that, rather than just representation of various states and their considerations.
Okay, before I throw it open to questions from the floor, any of the other presidents here would anyone like to say something?
I think that when you ask that, you know, how this is a fair question, because members, you know, when they look at it, they go, are we not going to get representation? As the president of a state branch, I brought this up when we were invited by Stephen to come in here and have the chat about this. I've actually said that there should be a minimum representation. And one of the major things we have all, as I've said over here, it's not about representation based on a geographic area. The main board is what's actually doing the work for the federal. When you come there, you're putting on the hat of the whole association. Yes, representation is very important, and you get that at all the other forums which we have. So,
can I also just add that the federal councillor was never meant to represent the state's interest. Like that structure has never meant to be for that. So, good governance, a process that has good governance would mean that they are independent, because otherwise you're actually introducing a significant amount of bias into that work. So I think, maybe, that is a really underlying foundation that needs to be communicated more. But that's why we're here, to say that out loud.
Okay, Fiona, what's the view of your members in Tasmania?
Yeah, I guess there's always concern, being a very small branch, that we're not going to be represented. But as Vi said before, I mean, at the moment the federal councillors, there's fairly even numbers from the states, but at the moment they're legally bound to represent the organisation as a whole. They don't represent the state, and that's not going to change. And now I think the selection of the new council is going to be more based on what skills they have and the diversity of thought, and I think it's going to be a real improvement.
Okay. Steve?
Juanita, if I can close that, it's really important to discuss the fact that this is an expert-led recommendation, and if you look who stands to lose, we're going down from 17 dentists to 5 plus 2 independents. Now, this was backed wholeheartedly by our federal council, but that means 2/3 of us happy to sacrifice ourselves for the greater good. It's also why, although I could do another year, I'm gone. As of November, by the AGM, I will be resigning electively to make room for the next 5. So in terms of self-interest, this couldn't be further from the truth. This is what is right for you. And I'm just incredibly proud that we're at the point where we have a board that are all on board to say, no, if I'm not the one for now, let it be one of the others. We're happy.
Okay, this is obviously a huge change. I'd like to invite questions from the audience now. Okay, who gets the mic? Thank you.
Do you want me to stand up? Hi, my name is Susan Wise. I'm the president of the College of Dental Surgeons and a past ADA Victoria president. I'm a graduate of the Australian Institute of Company Directors. I'd like to congratulate you on this. It's very good governance. It makes sense what we learn in the AICD. My question is, to be on the federal board, can you be on a state branch? As a state branch president? Or on a state branch full stop?
Sure.
Council.
It'll be skills-based, Susan, great question, thanks for the comment. The goal would be to minimise any form of conflict, and one of the hardest things we've had is you're appointed by a state branch. Currently, you usually have to be on that state branch. That means you've got 2 competing duties, and they are really hard to balance. That's what I've found. So the aim would be not to have that issue again.
And will that be part of the Constitution?
It'll be enshrined in the skills we're looking for.
Okay, thank you. Good question. Next question.
Thank you, for all of you, for this. I went through the plan and I loved it. It was a little bit of tickling at the end, but I think it's absolutely great the way it stands. I've got a question about women. How are women going to get onto the board? It's hard. I spent, as you know, 10 years as a federal councillor, and it was really hard leaving kids, not being paid. Are board members going to be paid? I think they should be. So that's my question. How are you going to make it easy to facilitate women being on the board?
Well, if we take, say, Fiona with a family, yes, the aim is to compensate the new board members, which is much easier when there's 7 of us. Worth bearing in mind, some of our independents have refused to pay. But notwithstanding that, we did find that when we switched to a very much skills-based matrix of selection and encouraged our branches to look into who fits that, our board went from very low numbers, Angela, I know you're a pioneer, to 1/3 women within 1 year. And we were so happy to see that. There's every chance that now you're going to see an even greater proportion because our numbers are smaller. And that's our hope, is to see the next female president of the ADA federally step up soon, really soon.
Do you actually have gender targets, Stephen?
A great question. No, in the interests of governance, the Governance Working Party and our expert advisors said quotas would not be ideal. If you set one quota, why don't you set another one for geographic? Why don't you set another one for this and that? So skills-based at first. But what we do find, given there's 50-50 women distribution in dentistry, at the moment, if we get the whole membership to apply, you tend to get a very good spread. And based on those skill sets, there's a very high chance, Angela, it'll be what you're hoping to see.
Okay.
Sorry, can I just jump in and just maybe answer a little bit of both those questions? For South Australia, there is a question that this process is raising, and we will absolutely need to review our constitution and look at whether true independence is actually what we have with the way that we select our federal councillors. So that is, we are on notice, even just generally speaking, regardless of this process, to look at that from our state perspective. And Angela, to your question, I think the states are on notice on that question as well, because the skill set that needs to be developed for any member to go into federal needs to be developed at the state branch. And in SA, we've started by acknowledging that, yes, we actually do need to improve, and we're putting in place a number of processes to ensure that people who are then going up, and it is a skills-based board that will be selected, that they actually do have the requisite skills. It gives us an anchor to do that work and create something against it.
Okay, who's holding the mic at the moment? Someone?
Nora, in the corner.
Nora?
I do at the back. Hello, my name's Nora Ayard. I'm actually a current federal councillor, and I think I'd like to start by saying, our members for a very, very long time have been advocating for change, and that is why we're here today, which is fantastic. the number one question, or I guess the follow-on from the representation question that I'm receiving the most from members is, we know that better informed boards are going to make better decisions, and we've talked about pathways for that, diversity of thought and information to come through to the new proposed Federal Council through the National Advisory Committee or whatever it ends up being called. I guess what reassurances can we give members from a grassroots level that the views at that forum are going to be, effective in shaping the decisions of our national association, and has that model been, effective in other contexts?
Thanks, Nora. Who wants to take that question? Rowan.
I think in this governance model, Nora, what happens is that you're fostering really important relationships at a stakeholder level, so chair to chair, CEO to CEO, and that way you get really good information at a stakeholder level, relationships at that level that leads to better organisational outcomes for both state and federal organisations, fitting together like two pieces of a jigsaw puzzle. At the end of the day, the members want to see efficient allocation of resources. They don't want to see duplication. They want to see their money spent in a frugal way, but in a way that improves the organisations mutually. And the way that you start doing that is, I believe, having the board being representative of the best board that can come together at that time with the best skills that complement each other to drive that particular organisation forward, and any other stakeholders can be brought along the journey at that higher stakeholder level, rather than having board members that come into a board meeting wearing a particular hat of another organisation, which is, as we know, not representing the fiduciary interests of the organisation that they're walking into the boardroom of. So I think that's how we circumvent that, by ensuring that we have really good stakeholder relationships and a mutually identified path to the future, which I think we can all agree on that we do have.
I think in addition to that as well, I think the National Advisory Committee, or the Policy Advisory Committee, whatever we're going to call it, I think, in addition to branch presidents, I think there's an intent that you'll have other people who can bring representation and diversity at that level as well. So, you could have, state directors, universities be able to feed into that process, and then you're going to get a more cohesive and another one would be recent graduates, bringing their opinions and voices into the mix, and that's where you're probably going to get better decisions at that policy level, which can then inform better decisions and better information coming up through to the board.
Amit, do you want to add something on that Policy Advisory Committee?
Yeah, the Policy Advisory Committee is very important, because that's where you actually bring all the people, Jonathan and Rowan has already mentioned. You bring on, academicians, you bring all the different people who come on to it. I do still respect Nora's question. Her question is, you can bring all of this together. How do you guarantee that the members are actually going to benefit from it? We are doing this with expert panels. We are doing this with any change is hard. That's true. And for the change to happen, there has to be some faith, a little bit of it. We don't have all the answers. This is a fact that we are making these changes in a stepwise manner, and this is why we're sitting here talking to all of you as members. End of the day, this decision comes to members. These changes have gone out to members. Members are the ones who have to accept it. So I think Nora has a valid point in asking that question. But I support Rohan's and Jonathan's point that the PAC, as we're calling it, at this stage, we'll have people from the presidents, academicians, public health experts, all the other representative stakeholders who will then have a voice in this.
Okay. Put your hand up if you've either got a microphone or you've got a question. Here we go.
Thank you. It's great to see all of the presence here on the stage. As a federal councillor, I just wanted to ask, has there been a process in the past where this has been attempted? And what's changed now? What is the mood now? What is the difference now to actually try and see this changes in governance brought forward?
I'm happy to take this one if you're happy, guys. Yes, we tried. And I'd argue we tried in the wrong way. It was to downsize the board for effectiveness, but it was done by just cutting geography. So we were aiming to go down to 4 or 5 less. Problem with that, two things. Members weren't informed in the correct way, with all due respect to those involved. They had the right idea. And also, we didn't get out there and advertise like this, how expert-led the advice was. So what's changed is one thing, education, and a second thing, communication. And we solemnly hope that now that we have everyone understanding the merits of this style of governance, or how we represent you, it's really pretty clear this is what we need to do and we have to do it.
Okay, thanks for your questions. Anybody else got a question on the issue of governance? Oh, down the front here. Can we get a microphone? Thanks, Ethna.
I'm getting the massage there from somebody.
That's why she's wearing her flat shoes. She's got to run quick.
Thank you. Look, my question is really, I guess a comment and a question. One is I'm Sharon Liberali, I'm a federal councillor at the moment. I have to congratulate the current council. I've only been on the council for a very short period of time, and one of the things I've really noticed from being a president from sort of nearly 10 years ago is the sort of positive attitude that the council, the way they interact with each other within the council, but also with NAC. One of the positives of this is that my experience previously was very much a jurisdiction-based approach rather than a united approach. So my experience on council at the moment has been, it's very much been a united approach. But we are all dentists and we're very homogenous in some sense. My question is in relation to the independent councillors that we will have, or the independent board members. And perhaps, Stephen, if I ask you, with your current position, what do you think some of the value adds will be for us as general dentists working in the community, paying our subscriptions, the strengths that those independent board members will bring to our association and to us as dentist members?
If anyone likes football, we're going to love this. I'm going to handball that right to Rowan.
I'm going to handball that back. Could you repeat the last part of that? Sorry.
Yeah, my question was My question was in relation to the value add that the independent board members will bring to our association, both in terms of governance, I suppose, but in terms of us as all members of this not-for-profit that is around the voice of oral health in Australia.
Yeah, so I think that's a great question, and it's twofold. I think the first part of it is that to have a community member, essentially, a person who's not a practicing dental practitioner on the board, provides a completely different variety of perspective, and that perspective is really important to the balance of constructs, as I mentioned, that as a board that you have to consider. In contemporary governance land now, we have to consider the ESG environment, and in dentistry, a lot of that comes down to the consumer perspective or the patient perspective. So that's one part of that.
Define ESG, please.
Yes, sorry. Yeah, so we're talking about environment, society, and governance. So those aspects of the decision making and how the decisions that we make as a board lead to better oversight over all of the outputs of what the organisation can achieve and deliver on. So you're hoping that an independent board member can come in and deliver on that, again, illuminating that blind spot that potentially the other board members are not able to provide. Secondly, it provides the board a unique opportunity to plug specific skills in relation to the strategy of the board at the time. So if the strategy of the board is M&A or mergers and acquisitions, or if the strategy of the board is investment, they're able to then go forth and secure a board member who has that particular skill set with them that they can bring along to the board to supplement the skills that already exist. There's a question about women on the boards, for example. One of the handbrakes for this current model has been that branches would provide a selection of councillors for ADA Inc. to then pick board members out of. If those selections that were voted in whatever voting process they had 90% or 100% of men, for example, there's a handbrake for ADA Inc. to then select an appropriately diverse group of candidates to provide cognitive thought and cognitive diversity and actually be able to enact effective outcomes for the organisation. So the independent board position is now best practice. And coming back to Martin's question, what's also changed before is I think it's now incumbent on us as directors across all organisations to be educated in governance, to be able to understand the importance of that selection in terms of, again, presiding and governing over an organisation. So all these things have changed and the dial keeps moving, and it's now incumbent on us to be best practice, and I think we all welcome that.
Look, I think the key there, Rowan, you said it, it's not actually a handbrake, it's a brick wall. Constitutionally, If we got all men, there's nothing ADA Inc. could have done about it because the nominations were from the state branches. So every time we got told, fix your diversity, well, you'd go, I'm sorry, there's nothing we can do. This fixes that once and for all, and all it needs is a vote on the 21st of November, and we've got it. The solution to everything that everyone's been complaining about is in your hands.
Vibe, you want to add?
Yeah, can I just take up on that as well? Like I know in front of us is this single point in time, which is a vote and it's a structure. But really, what I would hope that as dentists, we are above average in our in our skill set and intelligence. Probably would only say that in a closed group. But I would like to think that we would be able to open our minds to the potential of what this process has. And to the independent councillor that would come on, the independent board member, the selection of that person is not predetermined. Their skill set that is required will change over time. There will be renewal. There's time limits. There is so much scope for organic change. And then the body that is going to actually provide what the driver is going to be that policy or NAC equivalent body. So that skill set, as it changes, will be informed by the grassroots putting up what their requirements are through that body, and then that ultimately informs what is the skill set that's going to be picked with that independent councillor. And then from there we can be, and that does not exist at the moment. So if you want to compare today to what tomorrow may be, you just got to look at how agile are we today in that manner, and what do we hope to achieve in the future.
Fiona, you're looking pretty lonely up there as the only woman president up there. Are you confident that the new structure will lead to greater diversity?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think this probably isn't the greatest representation of women, but since I've been in, the presidents have changed a lot, and I'm not always the only female president. And I know Vi's successor coming up soon will be female, and my successor will be
well,
female,
it's not predetermined.
Oh,
We'll have a vote.
Maybe female, likely to be. So I think, and look, the whole process has been really open, and there's been so many opportunities for the states to contribute to the whole process. So I think it's only positive.
Okay. Do we have any more questions on governance? Yes.
Karen Alexander. Hi guys, it's nice to see the broad representation up there at the moment. I'd like to see another female, because one of the grizzles I always get is, can't you get another female up there? But having been moderately macerated by the old dinosaur council and executive, but come out the other end still reasonably smiling. Congratulations.
Tell us what you really think, Karen.
Congratulations to council for having taken these steps. Two concerns are, will we have a commitment from all branch councils to make sure that there is education and skill development so that we can get a broad range of people up there? Number one. Number two, there is a lot of value in corporate governance, and I'm not suggesting that people have to be there for 10 years on top of whatever time they spent in councils, but how are you going to protect that corporate knowledge that comes within an association and is actually important, so that we don't reinvent the wheel multiple times?
Cajun, would you like to take that?
I guess maybe moving on to the point, I've only just come in as a president in May, and just to give you a bit of information about the perhaps diversity, I'm also one of the, I wouldn't say, I don't know if this is a historical thing, but I'm also one of the youngest presidents. So I'm a recent graduate, and I'm about to hit my 5th year post-graduation in January. In terms of Northern Territory branch, of our current council branch, of the 9 councillors I believe we have, there are only 3 men, and the rest are women. The president before me was Dr. Emma Niebling, who did a fantastic job. And the reason why I want to share that is because also, from an NT perspective, we are also the youngest council branch, where full 100% majority of the executive council are all recent graduates. So when we talk about the future of dentistry, apart from just gender of female and men, what I'm also excited about is also making sure that the people who are going to be informing the change are the ones who are also going to be part of that change in terms of the longevity of our profession as well. And in terms of answering your question directly around about how we're going to upskill and maintain, I guess you get corporate governance knowledge, it's really about having systems and processes in place within each branch council to ensure that whoever is at a director position level has the necessary training that is obviously provided by the branch council, so that every person is equipped at the highest level for corporate governance.
Okay, thanks, Cajun. Anyone else want to add to that?
I was just going to add, I guess a lot of state branches, I think it's incumbent on each state branch to train up, to train up their own individuals who are on their council in that instance as well. And I think, but that being said, you might find instances where you have individuals who haven't necessarily come from a branch level and that's where I think the skills base really kicks in, because really depending on where the organisation needs individuals at any certain point in time, that's the skill that is required at that point in time. And so I think there is existing structures within each state branch to be able to develop skills, and I certainly think that state branches see that as a priority to develop the new and emerging leaders. And so I've got relatively high confidence that will be able to be maintained through the life cycle of leadership through and governance through both state branches as well as federally.
Okay, thanks, Jonathan.
I'll just add to Karen's other point. They've talked about the fact that you asked about how do we make sure we don't reinvent the wheel. Like at state level, we are talking about a different place, and same thing at the federal level. You don't lose your whole IP at one stage. Yes, Stephen is he's setting an example as a leader by saying, I want to reduce the council, hence I'm stepping down because I'm showing there's nothing in it for me. But at the same time, the federal council over here has a lot of knowledge, and the aim would be you'd still keep that part of the knowledge as part of this. And then in the future, as new people come on, it becomes a staged-wise process.
Okay, we have a question down the back there.
There's a couple of things. One is it's not just female versus male, but historically it's also been perceived that it's specialists over generalists, that it's city over regional. There's a lot of things that we need to look at for diversity, and a lot of people feel that, for example, the APRA board doesn't represent us as a profession at all well. So in shifting towards this, we need to make sure that the general body of the population understand, not with buzzword bingo and all of the things that, it's all very well to talk about skill sets or stakeholders or whatever, but the general population of ordinary dentists that have got families and kids and are busy understand some of these governance type terms, so that we actually feel like we're being brought along in the process. And it's not just like APRA, where they said, we only need maybe half a dentist on the board. Because otherwise we've just got our other major group that's supposed to represent us, not representing us as a group of people as a whole. I do understand that this is necessary, but when you're talking skill sets, we need to be, as a group, informed of what those type of things are, because there's a lot of people who, unless they're pretty sure they meet all the criteria, are not going to step forward.
Okay, that's a really interesting question about the language used, I have to say. I think we can all relate to that. Anybody want to take that, about getting more specific about what's needed to be in a leadership position?
You're looking at me, are you?
Yeah. I think it comes down to culture. So if you have the right culture and the organisation has strategic outcomes that are congruent with its original objectives that obviously change over time, then it shouldn't matter who sits around the board table. They should be able to make decisions in the best interest of the company or the organisation.
Can I say from the South Australian perspective, I think it is that question really, there is a strong branch focus on there, because what we're trying to do is with our recent graduates is really instill the thought that the profession And the idea of professionalism really rests with the amount of effort and the structures that they invest in as well. So I think that that goes to the heart of Rowan's culture piece there. I'm sorry if I interrupted before, but yeah, I think so. And I think that as branch president, I do take on board your commentary, your comment on the way that we speak about this, and I will definitely take this back to South Australia.
Yeah.
I think we had somebody here. Yes, thank you.
Yes, correct me if I'm wrong. So we've got a federal board of 7 dentists and 2 independents who are not dentists. Sorry?
So the future model will be 5 dentists and 2 independents.
5.
7.
Okay. What's 2?
New constitution says 3 to 5.
Sorry, I couldn't hear that.
Is it 3 to 5?
So now we are the Australian Dental Association. Our primary purpose is to advance the dental health in the community, but also to make help dentists. Now, 2 independents out of 7 is actually 28% as a percentage. That is very close to 1/3. Would we be able to have a similar outcomes for what you're wanting by having 1 less independent? So 1 independent and 8 dentists. That would give more dentists on the board. It would mean there that there's more dentists than what there are states, but that could be rotated through the states so that Tasmania for a period of time could have 2 people on the board there, and then the Territory could have 2 people on the board there, rather than having New South Wales permanently having two people, or Victoria, because of the increased population, permanently having 2, so that all states would have equal representation, rather than the most populous states dominating the board there by having just 1 less independent. That 1 less independent can be recruited for their skill set there. Why do we need 2 independents who have got 2 skill sets? Can't there be 1 highly specific person?
Yeah, we're getting back to the geographic representation question
We are.
again.
It just keeps coming back to it. Look, the simplest answer here, expert-led review leads to expert recommendations. We did not decide this. We're taking the advice. In terms of independent directorship, simplest answer again I can give you is one of our jobs is to be custodians of your money, member money. We invest it. There are no dentists on our current board with investment experience, yet we make that decision. And if we lost all of your money, you would still say, well, that was a great idea because you had 3 New South Welshmen on board. No, it's about the skills. The other thing about that is if you're rolling through, as we are planning, 2 directors off each year, there'll be a retention of the knowledge, and there'll never be the ability of one state, no matter how populous, to stack the board, so to speak. The other second barrier to that is the board nominations committee will have 1 member from every single state. So in order to stack the board, you'd have to convince every other state that's a great idea. And finally, that board is chaired by an independent director, or an independent person rather, that's not a dentist, and their job will be to keep it unbiased. There is also, fourthly, a built-in clause in the Constitution that will be never more than 2 from 1 state. Correct me if I'm wrong, Damien? 2 from 1 state. So we have thought about that because the main worry for us was what would happen if New South Wales, the most populous state, happened to get all of the nominations. Nobody else bothered. Well, that cannot happen. There'll be a call from every other state to get people in. So I really thank you for that question, because that took us about a year to work out. And with the help of experts, I think we've found the nicest way forward.
Okay, thank you. We've got 1 question here.
My name's Scott Davis. I'll make an announcement. I'm the Federal Vice President, so I am involved in the process. I feel I need to take exception briefly with city being overrepresented to regional, where it's the opposite. we are where we are because we changed the culture of the organisation intentionally and worked at that hard for years, and that has led to group mentoring of new members, etc., and we've achieved greater diversity and new people through it being a better workplace. I support the regulators in their professionalism in the way they communicate with us, reach out to us, listen to us, and I have absolute faith in the integrity of the people on AHPRA and the Dental Board as well. I think it's really just such a special day for me after nearly 20 years in a governance position at a branch or a federal level to see all of these people on this stage together, speaking a similar language, working together as a team for the interests of all dentists in Australia. And I just applaud all of you on doing this selflessly, as often many people who work in not-for-profits year after year are. I think the collaboration and the communication between us as branches, as other independent organisations that we talk to, has led to better governance because we communicate more effectively. And I wonder at the views of the branches, are they happy with the communication process that we undertake? Is there more we can do into the future to be an even greater organisation? Thank you.
Okay, now is that a question or a comment? Bit of a comment. We've got 5 minutes left, so I'm just wondering, we still have questions about governance, so I think we might just continue along this because this is really the big topic. We have a question down the back there.
Rob Sivitson, some of you may know me. First of all, I think it's a great idea that you got expert advice in terms of how to go forward. My main concern, and I'm just wondering, do you feel that I'm correct in having this concern, is that you may have got advice from people who are used to giving advice to the likes of big fee-for-profit organisations, publicly listed companies. Now, in my mind, the ADA, and whether it's federal or state, should not be considered to be a fee-for-profit type organisation, and that perhaps we may be needing to look at a slightly different structure. I also have concerns that you may be too focused on the requirement for the skill sets. Do you not believe, or do you not feel that perhaps an organisation, a member-based organisation, a professional organisation, should be primarily grassroots driven with feedback as well as input and support from the members rather than a top-down, I'm cautious about using the word dictatorial type governance level, which is more appropriate for the likes of BHP, the Commonwealth Bank and Qantas?
Who'd like to take that question?
Great question. First answer would be we screened the company used, and it is specialised in not-for-profit associations for that very reason. So we wouldn't get an ASX 100 style recommendation, regardless of everything that they've dealt with from fireys to medical. It's the same recommendation. So we screen for that. The other thing would be we actually seek to expand representation. So currently, it's probably worth knowing our National Advisory Committee is the entire federal board of 18 plus these guys. That's it. So by expanding our Policy Advisory Committee and downsizing the board, we're actually opening up far more voices to be able to report to the board what members want than we've ever had before. Our goal is not to dampen it, it's actually to expand it. Then the last thing is, if the board of 5 plus 2 is tasked with making sure that your ADA is running sustainably, that's a very different task to reviewing the policy on amalgam. So our main view is get all the experts we can in this Policy Advisory Committee in the room, allow that committee to inform our expert policy, our other committees, under the infrastructure that the board builds so that ADA can continue for the next 100 years.
Can I also just add in there that I'd like to point out that in the last 10 to 15 years, the regulatory framework in which dentists work has completely changed. AHPRA has come into existence. We have a whole range of other legislated bodies that we interact with on a daily basis. And also on a more general front, if you look at not-for-profits that have failed, not-for-profits that have struggled financially, you will find that there is a common denominator there, and that is poor governance. That is an inability to be agile in a changing environment. And I would also go as far as to say, if you were to look at the most successful not-for-profits that are functioning in Australia at the moment, you will also notice that the governance in those organisations is taking this route. While there might be differences, sure, that might depend on context, but this is gold standard for a reason. And finally, there is a difference between what, and this is a point that was made earlier, the board is not a dictatorial function. It cannot have that in this new, under the Constitution. Their work is informed by other components and other structures that exist. So I completely disagree that that's the position that we will end up with.
Thank you so much for that. We're actually out of time now, and I'm told that we do have a hard finish. I want to thank you so much for taking part in this discussion. It's been fascinating. Sorry?
I just kind of say a last few words.
Yes, of course.
I actually think, his question was, it's good that people are asking that question. The question that you asked is one person asking it, 1,000 people thinking it. If you don't ask, you won't. This is the reason why we're having this forum. This is the reason this has actually gone out to members for giving your feedback on it. End of the day, it's not us making these decisions. We are suggesting changes to this constitution. We're bringing it to you all. We're trying to explain that the organization is growing and